So do you or someone in your family have a belief that you're not good enough, not important, not valued? You are. And today's speaker is going to share with us where that comes from and what we can do for it.
Building spirituality, family, health, and business. This is the Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.
Hey, Giant Builders. So today's speaker reminded me of a few other past podcasts that I have done that I think would be kind of a connection to what we're talking about. So I hope you'll visit those as well. All right, let's go. So, hey, Giant Builders. Oh, I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Our guest is Sabrina Troback. Hi, Sabrina. How are you?
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm good.
Great. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do and who you are?
Sure. So I am a registered clinical counselor. So I have my own private practice where I work with people in helping them deal with mental health through a bit of a different perspective. We're looking at things from the perspective of our core belief. So rather than just figuring out the surface thing, like say anxiety or anger, we're looking at it at a deeper level of trying to figure out what's causing those things. And usually what it comes back to is a person's core belief. So if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I'm going to be drawn to people, places, things, experiences, perceptions that reinforce and support that core belief. So we're looking at that core belief, how it's developed in a person throughout their life, and then what we need to do to challenge it so a person feels more good enough, important, and valued.
Wow, that's really a hard thing. I think there's so many things in the world, especially social media, that try to push us into the not good enough sections.
It's something that is at the core for a lot of people. So social media knows, we know what button to push to trigger and engage people for sure. Yeah. And then it's just this feeding off of it. Yeah.
Mhm. So how do core beliefs come about?
So they develop throughout your life. Definitely people who experience trauma are going to generally have that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. But even people who just had a lot of instability, they, moved a lot growing up as a child, or they had a parent that was gone or vacant a lot of their life. Even a home that seems fairly healthy, but they never really talked about things. They didn't learn to talk about emotions. They didn't feel comfortable and safe to hold their or to talk about their emotions, so they end up holding them in. That often contributes to that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued as well. If all these every experience we has create emotion, and if I don't feel my emotions and I just hold them in, it gets harder and harder and harder to cope. So then we feel like we're not good enough because we can't handle even just basic things because we're so full with emotion as well. So all those kind of things feed into and develop that core belief. It's not usually one thing, it's a combination of a bunch of things and even how they're dealt with. So if something tragic happens, but there's counseling and support and they're able to work through and sort through it, the core belief, good enough, important, and valued, can be developed. But in our society, we're not very good at dealing with things. We generally push it down, pretend it's not there, never talk about it again. That definitely feeds that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued.
Yeah, so I'm one of those emotional interior persons. I keep everything inside. My husband lets it all out. I keep it all in. Is there like an opposite attract type thing there?
There definitely is
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. If both were exploding all over the place, there's not a lot of space for it. So we often see one is and one isn't, and they kind of meet each other's needs for sure.
Yeah. So how can we change those core beliefs? Because okay, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I can become an exterior emotional person. I don't know if that's possible or not. So how do I approach the challenges of those core beliefs if that's how I am?
Well, I don't think it has to be an exterior emotion piece. You
Okay.
can feel your emotions and sort your emotions and let them out all on your own. Nobody else has to be around. You don't need anyone else to validate your emotions, but you do need to figure out how to let them out. But doing that in the privacy of your own home where no one else is around, no one even knows anything about it, that's really, really important. So we do need to get better at being able to let those emotions out, but it doesn't have to be anybody else's business that you're doing it.
Well, that's cool. Okay. I would say that is what I do. So that's
Good.
that. Okay. So do these core beliefs, like, how do they affect us? Do they create stress? What do they do to us?
So they play a very significant role. We're constantly trying to prove to ourselves that what we believe about ourselves is true. So if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I'm going to be drawn to things that reinforce that. So we see people, let's say, struggle with alcohol. So when I go out and I drink or get drunk, in the moment, I don't have to deal with any of that. It's all gone. I've numbed it. I don't have to worry about it. But now the next day, I feel hungover. I have spent money that I didn't really have. I broke promises to myself. I said something that I regret or I'm embarrassed. Ultimately ends up reinforcing and supporting that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. Our brain wants balance. And so if we're doing something that's more of a healthy coping strategy, we often end up sabotaging ourselves because now it's out of balance. It doesn't match anymore. So we sabotage ourselves to go back to that way of thinking that supports and reinforces that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. That core belief also plays a very significant role in anxiety. So we often talk about anxiety about being, about the triggers. So, I have anxiety of being around a lot of people or crowds. Well, if it was about crowds, then every single person on the face of the earth would have anxiety of crowds, but not everyone does. So anxiety isn't about the triggers. It's about my belief in my ability to handle the triggers. So if I believe I can handle crowds, I'm not going to have anxiety. If I believe I can't handle crowds, I'm going to have anxiety. So if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I'm not going to be as confident in myself that I can handle things. Therefore, I'm going to have a lot more anxiety.
So how can we help our children, grandchildren? We're focused on my grandchildren now. If we see signs of maybe like, okay, my second son was always, just as a young guy, always beating himself up for not being good enough. Even just like a little putt-putt game, he would be really mad that he just couldn't do that. How do we help our children get more confidence and know that they are good?
I think one of the things that's really important to remember as parents is when our child is struggling, we want to make them feel better. But that's not in their best interest. We're doing that because I feel uncomfortable that my child is struggling. So I need my child to feel better so I don't have to feel my emotions. So as parents, we need to get better at recognizing and understand what am I doing what I'm doing? Is it really in the best interest of my child or am I doing it to suppress my own emotions? So if my child is struggling, rather than just quickly trying to make them feel better, I need to validate that emotion and say, "Oh, what are you feeling? Makes sense that you're feeling that. I'm sorry that you're feeling that." Have that sense of connection with them. After you feel the emotion and or let him feel the emotion, then it's taking it and figuring out, okay, what's a plan? How can we resolve this? What are some possible solutions that we can come to? But we have to get better at helping our children be able to feel their emotions, recognize and identify their emotions, and let them out with a sense of almost confidence, not shame, so that they can just let their emotions out. As they do that, they're learning to regulate themselves. They're developing much more confidence in their ability to manage their emotions. Confidence is the opposite of anxiety.
Okay, I like that. So what about if it's an adult around us? Same thing, or is it different?
It's the same thing. With adults, I think one of the first things we have to do is become aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it. If I'm not aware of what I'm doing, I'm not going to change. Nothing different is going to happen. So the first step we have to do is become aware of how much is that core belief really influencing your life? How much does it pop up? Where does it pop up? Once we have that awareness, then we can start to figure out what we want to do with it. But yes, that emotion piece is a really, really important part. A lot of my clients, the adult clients, especially when they come in, and I ask them two major questions. What are you thinking? and what are you feeling? And often when I say, what are you feeling? They'll tell me a thought. I just can't deal with this anymore. I say, well, no, that's a thought. What are you feeling? Well, I just don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm at the end of my rope. Again, those are thoughts. What's the emotion? So we have to learn and understand the difference between a thought and an emotion and realize that thoughts create our emotions. So I have a thought that creates a chemical reaction that I then feel physiologically in my body. So emotions aren't good or bad, right or wrong. They are a physiological response to our thought. Once we get better at being able to recognize that and identify the emotions, then I can start to feel them. Challenge with that is for the vast majority of people, they've spent the vast majority of their life working very hard at pushing down and numbing those emotions so they don't have to feel them. So now someone says, okay, got to start feeling your emotions. Well, if I've spent my whole life pushing them down, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what a lot of the emotions are. So one of the things I always do is I give my clients a list of a whole bunch of different emotions. And what I tell them is when you start to feel something, pull out that list and just read through it. The emotions that you are feeling will pop off the page at you. And then you can start to identify and realize what those emotions are. But to just in the moment to try to think of what the emotion is when you've spent your whole life suppressing them, not going to be very effective. The other thing that makes emotions challenging is it's very rare that we feel one emotion. We usually feel a combination of 3, 4, 5, 7, 15 different emotions at one time. So to label emotion when I've got a bunch of emotions going on can be a little overwhelming as well. And I think you said about your partner and him feeling his emotions. Often what we see is explosive, so anger. But what we say is anger is not a standalone emotion. Anger is what we do to suppress other emotions that we don't want to feel. So if I stop and think about a time that I felt angry, and then I stop and think about other emotions underneath, vulnerable, powerless, lonely, sad, fear, fear of rejection, helpless, hopeless, powerless. There's usually several of those that are underneath it. So we've learned throughout society, if I get angry, more socially acceptable. So we're more comfortable to feel that emotion. If we get better at recognizing the emotion that's underneath the anger, we don't need the anger anymore. And one of the big ones is anxiety. If I start feeling anxious and I get angry, people back off and leave me alone. My anxiety goes down. If I have a reputation of being angry, people don't challenge me as much. So I can keep my anxiety more under wraps. So anger is a very common coping strategy that a lot of people use to try to deal with and manage their anxiety.
Okay. Well, what would a first meeting with you look like?
Uh, I have a wide variety of clients. I have some that come as well. I work with families, so I have some younger ones. Generally, when I'm working with families, though, I need to work with the parents as well. So it's much easier for the parents to pass the information on to the child than for the child to try to pass it up to the parents. Not as successful.
Yeah.
But I have clients anywhere aging from early 20s all the way up into their 70s. So it's generally people who are realizing they're just not happy. They're not content. They want more. They feel off. They can't find that kind of sense of peace or happiness, and they want to try to do something about it. A lot of my clients come for a specific ring. They have anxiety, they have anger, they have relationship problems. But once we start talking about that core belief, they go, oh, yeah, that's more what this is. That those are all just kind of symptoms of that core belief. So then we start working on helping people understand where that core belief came from and what we need to do to manage it differently.
Okay. Well, tell me about your book.
Okay, so I was a teacher for about 20 years. I was a learning assistant teacher, and at the end of my teaching career, I found out about this model of therapy that I practice. So I quit my job and started my own private practice. And within about 6 months, I've had a waiting list, and I started my practice in 2010. And I hate having to tell people, sorry, I've got a year and a half waiting list. There's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
So I decided I would write a book to at least provide a resource for people who can't access counseling because of waiting lists or because of financial issues or, just aren't maybe quite ready for that step, but want to start trying to understand things differently. So I started writing the book. I never in my life, ever in a million years, thought I would be an author, but I just slowly started picking away at it. It took me about 7 years to write it. First 5 years were just, when I had time between life and work and everything else. And then I took a year and really just focused on getting it ready. And then I spent a year with a publisher as well. And so the book helps you go through and better understand that core belief. So it is a handbook where you're reading part of the information, and then you're applying your own personal experiences to the information that is in the book. So it's helping you better understand your own core belief, how it's still developed over time, what anxiety looks like for you, anger, what you use anger to suppress, other emotions, coping strategies to manage all those things. It's a good kind of basis to help you kind of get a bit of a foundation underneath you.
I'm doing a timeout here. So, all right, this came up in my head for two reasons. The person I spoke to this morning has autism, and part of that made me really sad that he was bullied and felt not included and things of that nature. I have a grandson who, in the past year, also was diagnosed with autism. So, can I go down the point of like, how do you help children who are different, or is that not one of your specialties?
Yeah, we can go there for sure.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Back in. So it just came to my head because a couple weeks ago I had a guest on who has autism, and I have a grandson who was recently diagnosed with autism. So I'm really focused on this because I don't want things to be difficult for him. So how do you build up like you're good enough with somebody who has different?
it, so there's a few different steps that we have to do, and it's similar for everyone, but definitely for people that have a difference from your typical society. Often that core belief is a bit more significant, it's a bit more intense. So we really need to accept and understand where we are. So if I have a learning disability, if I have autism, whatever it might be, it is what it is. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, it doesn't have to be a good thing, it just is what it is. So helping them learn to accept and understand that for who they are can be really, really helpful. And one of the key things is connection. So we want to have that sense of connection. But with autism, that's a bit different because that connection piece is often the piece that's a struggle there. So it's trying to figure out, how do you have that connection where it's safe for them. So maybe it's during, reading stories to them, or going for a walk where you're walking side by side. You don't have to make eye contact. You're going to have those opportunities to find that sense of connection. You just have to figure out what it looks like. You have to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more gentle, a little bit more soft, and it likely is going to take a bit more time as well. As a teacher, I worked with kids that have attention deficit learning disabilities, different kinds of things like that. And it's hard. Everyone else in class is doing okay, and they're struggling. And so they often, by the time I got to them, I usually taught at the junior high level. By the time the students came to me, they'd given up because they would rather be labeled lazy than stupid. And so it's easier for them to just not try than to try and fail. And so that core belief is really significant at that point. It's hard to challenge and change those things. It can be done, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of time where you're slowly just picking away at things. One of the things in helping people get better at being able to recognize and talk about emotions, especially when we talk about autism, is that emotion piece can often be a little bit more of a sensitive area. Is it's hard for me to talk about my emotions, but I can talk more about what someone else is feeling. So instead of talking directly about my emotions right away, go third person. So when you're out at the park, what do you think that child's feeling? It's more safe for me to talk about what that child's feeling than what I am really feeling. So talking about third person, if you're reading a story or watching a TV, stop and talk about the character. What do you think that character is feeling? We don't really know. He doesn't really know what that character is feeling. What they're telling you is what they would be feeling in that moment but it's more safe because it's third person. So that can be a really helpful tool to help them get more comfortable. The other one, again, depending on level, is write the emotions down. So with kids, we start with the four basics: happy, angry, sad, and scared. And sometimes I write it on a piece of paper, make it into four quadrants. Depending on the child's ability, it's the word, or sometimes it's a face. And I even have the kids draw the face. So the kids draw a happy face, sad, scared. I write the word underneath so we know what it is. Then when they're feeling something, if I say, "What are you feeling?" For me to even say sad or scared creates emotion. But
Mm.
for me to point to the word doesn't create as much emotion. So having that paper where they can just point to sad is more likely they're going to do that than to actually say sad. So again, we need to break it down into really small steps so they feel safe to take that first risk. Once they've done that, tried that a few times, then we can go a little bit more and a little bit more. But we need to figure out where they're at and start there rather than trying to get them to where we think they should be starting at.
Oh, that was great. That was very helpful. Thank you very much. So I tell you what we're gonna do. I think you can tell it's getting ready, you're ready to rain here. Like I'm getting darker and
It's
darker.
getting darker.
So, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna give away one of your books. So Giant Builders, if you leave a comment below, then I'll have a drawing and I will send you one of the books. So any closing thoughts?
um, just I guess a closing thought around anxiety is anxiety progresses and gets more and more intense. We often know what anxiety looks like when it's really high, say at 4 but I don't necessarily know what it's like at a 1, 2, or a 3. So part of what we want to do is get better at being able to recognize our anxiety lower at at a level. So I start getting sweaty palms, or I'm always kind of fidgeting. I get a lump in my throat, or I get a pain in my chest where it's hard to breathe. My ears are ringing. Different kind of symptoms like that that are lower on the level can be really, really helpful to help us put strategies in place at that point. Then we can bring the anxiety down and it doesn't have to go as significant.
No, that was great. All right. Well, thank you, Sabrina. You gave us so much great information. I will have your contact information below so that listeners can reach out to you. And thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was nice talking with you today.
All right, Giant Builders, we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening. This has been The Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.